Good morning, everybody. Okay, I hope you're ready for a big start to your morning, a fresh start to your morning. Bakh'abantu's in the studio in Johannesburg. I am in Cape Town, and we are ready to go. I hope you're ready to join us. And by the way, yesterday I noticed, I see John Bad Dog saying, like as you come in. I don't know if you saw yesterday, but as people were joining on X, it was like coming up in the comment section. Very
I saw that. I saw that like people are starting to join on the stream on X.
Yeah, absolutely. So now basically it announces you. It's like a doorbell. So as you come in, it's like ding bong, this person just joined. Ding bong, this person just joined. All right, so we got a lot to get to today. We've got JJ Cornish joining us a bit later on with Africanalysis, the last one of the year, and really our chance to kind of catch up on the big stories of 2023. He knows I'm a big lists guy, so he's got a list of like the countries that have done well and the countries that have not done so well. So we'll check in with him later on. And later, beyond that, at 7 o'clock, we have Democracy 101, which is a new and exciting part of the lineup on a Tuesday, where we get to look at, I suppose, like the state of our democracy, what people know about democracy, the definitional stuff. And today we'll be speaking to Wayne Susman, who is easily one of the most interesting people we've had on the show this year. And we'll be talking about all kinds of interesting stuff. How strong are the EFF in reality? What's going to happen to the ANC, especially now in the light of Jacob Zuma and his Umkhonto we Sizwe party, which of course we spoke about quite a lot yesterday. And the general election versus the municipal and by-elections. Yeah. So plenty of good stuff to talk about there. And I think for a lot of people, these are the basics, right?
Yeah.
If you don't get this
is the stuff we talk about with civics, to empower people in order to make an informative decision, right? It's all a guess game, but like there is no greater guess than an educated guess.
Correct. So this is very funny. Francois says, good morning to all the Afrikaans people, including myself, in all the different buys. Struis buy, still buy, Elands buy, and Titi spy. It's funny, right? It's like there are a couple of these places that are only Afrikaans people from the Free State or the Northern Cape, or obviously some of them from Northwest and
Northwest, yeah.
That's where they go, right? And these buys are where they start.
I've always had planned this road trip with my mates, like going to that side of the Northern Cape. It's this when they do I don't know if you guys had this, and like we used to watch SABC, right? SABC News at 8 o'clock. No, it was 7:30. And then you have like the beach report, right? Oh, in Durban, it's overcrowded. Like they just do all the coast. And then we just stop at the Northern Cape. I'm like, that's like one of our biggest coastlines. And we just don't report on those beaches.
Nobody goes there. It ends somewhere around Azerfontein. Okay, so that's as far north as most people are prepared to go. There's a place called Alexander Bay.
Yeah.
That's the only one. Yeah, and no one goes there. No one. I've never met anyone who's ever been there and survived. So
exactly. The only reason why I know that one, because it goes right up at the top. I'm like, oh, it's close to Namibia. It's basically Namibia. Okay, cool. And Namibia is basically South Africa.
Correct. Yeah. Well, it is. I mean, for a while it was even a protectorate of South African jurisdiction, I think. All right. So a couple of interesting things going on here. I see that Snipe says it was DMX's birthday yesterday. I'm not sure if you did some rough riding. Well. DMX, of course, my favorite rapper. I remember he died in the same year as Prince Philip, and I was devastated by both. And people don't understand how you can be devastated by both the death of Prince Philip and DMX. But that's kind of that's my eclectic mix.
Exactly. In the world of Venn diagrams, that's where Gareth Cliff exists.
And I exist in the space between DMX and Prince Philip. Absolutely. All right, so what kind of person finishes school and decides that they want to take money from other people by force if needed and decide how to spend it for a living? I don't know who you're talking about here, Slippery Pickle, but I wouldn't talk about Bakh'abantu like that if I were you. It's not great.
No, he's talking about politicians, but also... But yes, that was my plan. You caught me, Slippery Pickle.
Here we go. Patrick says, Alexander Bay, Port Nolloth. The reason a beach is a shit, water is freezing and terrible scenery. Port Nolloth. I mean, what a terrible name for a place. It just sounds, doesn't it sound awful? Port Nolloth sounds like somewhere where nobody could possibly want to be.
Yeah, nah. Like, I'll never go to Port Nolloth. I didn't even know we had a Port Nolloth. Damn.
No, neither did I. Belladonna says, I made a tongue-in-cheek list of Christmas presents for friends and family, like a roasting list. I'm on the list too. Well, I have not done, and I know it's going to end up being a problem, I've not done any Christmas shopping yet. There are a few things that I ordered online like a month ago. They've arrived, but now I have to go through them and see who still needs presents, and this is where it gets complicated. So I suppose Thursday when I get back, I'm going to have to go and do the shopping, and that's going to be nightmarish. Because this is the week, right?
Down, right?
This is the worst. This is the worst possible week that you could end up having to buy Christmas presents.
This is the worst possible week to be on a road, on a national road.
Oh my God.
More like,
yeah,
if you didn't do it this week, like I saw Sis Pumi had her Christmas tree. She's like, 6 days, 6 more sleeps or something like that. And I'm like, nah, we're really there.
No. Some people are very organized. Like I don't know how, but they're people like my grandmother used to be like this. There are those people who, like, they have a cupboard or a drawer at home where they keep presents from April already. They are so organized. And then when it comes to the end of the year, they just go to their present drawer, their gift drawer, and they find like all this stuff and they just pull it out of the gift drawer and then they sort it. They've got all their shit together. Like that requires a degree of planning, which I'm just not capable of.
A degree of planning and a bit of caring, right? Because I also have a relative like that. It's like we're walking in a mall. It's basically February, and she's like, "Oh yeah, that would make a great Christmas gift." But this comes after the birthday, so they kind of, and then the gifts have themes for that year. And because you've talked about something in 10 years ago, I'm like, I don't care that much about people. I love them, but I don't care that much.
A gift drawer, I mean, Belladonna's laughing at this, but some people are that organized. They plan that far in advance. So good luck to them. Power to them. I'm not one of those people. There is much I have to still learn about that level of planning. Sorry. It's just not in me. There are magical, mystical, mythological people who manage to like do Christmas presents halfway through the year. Those people, I do not understand their powers, but I envy them greatly.
But like now, like, so with growing up, like I have like a bunch of nieces and nephews. So like, that's like the best to give for, right? Because I know what they want because they told me what they want. Like, but old people, I think you should have all the shit that you want. So short of gag gifts or something very sentimental, like kids are like, nah, I want that new Nerf gun. Oh, cool. I'll get you a Nerf gun.
Yeah. No. I mean, listen, I always think it's easier to buy things for girls, straight up, much easier because they're just more options, right? And girls like lots more things. Guys are much harder to buy for, and especially older men like your dad or your uncle or your
like how many knives can you get this man? How many knives?
Right. So you run out of ideas somewhere around knives. Is SIM card already on leave? No, she will be on Friday for our last show. In fact, Friday is our last show, and someone asked in the comments here, Snipes asks, are you back on the 8th or the 16th? Snipes looks like one of these people who plans in advance because all the questions are coming through thick and fast. So we're setting the agenda for 2024 already, according to Snipes. We are back on the 8th of January. That will be our first show back in 2024.
Yeah.
Which is just around the corner, hey? I mean, it's not like we're even away for that long. So you don't, it's not like you have to panic that we're not going to be here for ages. It's very quick.
Basically 2 weeks.
Yeah. But let me just tell you, because people like Snipes plan in advance. So no live shows tomorrow and Thursday, but we'll be playing my interview with Dan Mace, who I think you will find very interesting. Ryan set this one up. He found out about Dan Mace. Dan Mace is Mr. Beast's philanthropy channel guy. And he is a very interesting dude. And I would recommend that for anyone who wants to do interesting stuff on YouTube, who really wants to start hitting the ball out of the park on YouTube, you've got to watch this interview. It's fascinating. I met him in Cape Town the last time I was here, 2 weeks ago. And the things he says, you're not going to get this information from anybody else. He knows how the algorithm works. He knows how to make great videos. He knows what to put into those videos. I mean, it's really, I joke in the interview about how, they say people who like sausages would do well not to see how they're made in the kitchen, right?
Yeah.
It'll put you off. So he and I spoke about how there's this way to do YouTube, which for people who are really interested in that stuff is fascinating, but it takes all of the magic out. And it really is formulaic in some ways. Not to say that they aren't talented people, but it's very formulaic.
Belladonna asks, when's this interview? It premieres tomorrow, 6 a.m.
Tomorrow. Yeah, so tomorrow we got Dan Mace, and then on Thursday we've got 2 other interviews for you. One is with Red Hills Pioneering Center for Dialogue and Conflict Resolution. So Red Hills, a school in Joburg that are doing, I think, probably the most interesting work, in an environment of cancel culture and an environment which doesn't really encourage debate in most South African schools. These guys are pioneering a way that I feel is, especially when difficult conversations come up and difficult topics are broached with young people, these guys are doing it in a totally different way. So I think you'll enjoy hearing from them. That's with Red Hill, and that's on Thursday. And then it is a must-listen exclusive. LJ Fenter, who we've had on the show twice before, this time reveals some fascinating information that could potentially be quite dangerous for him. And he's agreed to do it because he reckons he's got stage 4 cancer. He's got nothing to lose. He wants to talk about some very, very interesting information that he has been sitting on for a long time and is now prepared to talk about. And then we'll be back on Friday for the last live show of the year. So it's going to be a busy week, even though we're not doing live shows tomorrow. And Thursday, there's good stuff that you haven't heard before.
Yep.
Exciting.
So like what you said about stage 4 cancer, it made me think of that Curb episode where they want to take advice for stage 4 cancer people. That's the only advice worth its weight, apparently, according to this formula.
Right, exactly. What other information could be useful if you're not doing... By the way, Larry David is so funny. So he's back for, I think it's season 12.
Season. Yeah, the final season.
Yeah, the final season. And he's so excited. He's like, I can't wait to do this final season and then put this horrible show to bed. He's like, I've got a toxic relationship with this show.
He hates all his show. He hates Seinfeld. He hates everyone who talks to him about Seinfeld.
He hates everything.
He's like, it's gone. It's in the past. 27 years ago. Get over it.
I can't help thinking like I must be absorbing part of Larry David in my life, because I sometimes feel like I'm living a slightly, well, quite substantially younger kind of life, but the same sort of life as Larry David is. I feel the same way about this show sometimes. On a good day, I love it, but Snipe says, are Gina and Trevor keen on bringing back their show? How much do they want? Well, we spoke to Trevor Gumby last year. The problem is that show was so outrageous that nobody with money would come near it because it broke all the rules. So it costs money to make really good podcasts, and we want to do video, obviously, going into the new year. So finding sponsors for this stuff isn't so easy. And I know Trevor's been trying, but let me tell you.
But Snipes just asked how much they want, Gareth.
How much they want? We just want to cover the costs on that one, because I don't think we'll make money. But it's got to be worth their while. It's got to be worth everybody's while. Otherwise, what's the point, right?
Yeah.
So this is an interesting story. You spoke about, the end of the year and everything. So apparently the city of Cape Town, where I am at the moment, said its traffic services recorded over 36,000 speeding offenses in just the past week, including 24,000 fines for various traffic violations. City Mayoral Committee member for Safety and Security, JP Smith, said officers impounded more than 200 vehicles, executed nearly 2,000 warrants of arrest, and made 136 arrests. So that's high. That's in Cape Town.
That's high, but I'd like to like if you break down the numbers, right? Like what are these? What is speeding? Is it like 121? Is it like is what driving 65
Yeah.
in a 60 zone? So like if
So,
we're breaking it down, like what like
yeah,
yeah, it's
I
very
think with speeding, it's 10 kilometers over the speed limit.
okay, cool.
Usually gets you a fine. If you are, I think it's 30 kilometers over the speed limit, that could result in an arrest. I'm not 100% sure, somewhere around there. But I mean, Cape Town they take a lot more trouble with actually prosecuting offenses here than they would in
Yeah.
Gauteng. In Gauteng, you can still go like, please, chief, can I buy you breakfast? You know?
Yeah, so like
No, you
in Cape
can.
Town,
Am I right?
at least you, yeah, no, at least in Cape Town, you even see like it goes back to the road because you see the police presence, you see the roads are good, right? And you
Yeah.
drive over in Cape Town, so they kind of incentivize that. In Joburg, yeah, we don't care. Like, yeah, we just put them there, no arrests, and just come back like with bellies full.
Well, they just, let's just say they take their stuff seriously here, and they follow the law, and the cops can't be bribed as easily. So that frightens a lot of people, because we're like, if you're from Joburg, you think there's always a way, right?
Yeah, you don't
There's always a way.
understand.
We can always make a plan. Not in Cape Town. That's why when I come down here, I only Uber.
Yeah, I feel like for people holidaying in Cape Town, that's the only option. Why are you driving in Cape Town? Because you're going there to party.
I've got to say, even in Joburg, I had a friend come through on Saturday to something that I was doing at my house, and I just said to her, like, you don't want to take the risk, even if you are not drinking, even if you're not speeding, even if you're following all the rules. The reality is, like, there are going to be cops who want to try and squeeze money out of you. And the only way you can be sure not to be put in a position where you have to have a discussion about, being a crook and having to try and bribe them is by being in an Uber, because they can't do anything then. I think that the Metro Police hate Ubers more than anyone else.
Yeah, but have you seen the hustle though that goes down like with Uber drivers and the Metro cars?
Oh yeah,
no, they stop you proper. They like, yeah, chief, we know you have money. Like it's no conversation. It's like, we know you have money. Oh, you have a client. We could hold you here for 10 minutes. That could impact your earning, or you could just give me the 50 rand and walk away. So it's like, it's just an exchange.
Well,
like, yeah, done.
Is that why I saw you breakfasting with a traffic officer? Yes, that's probably about right. But this JP Smith is, according to some people, a horrible authoritarian bully, because he's the guy who banned alcohol sales in the Western Cape on weekends. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
Because he said people can't be trusted. And he convinced Helen Zille, who was the premier at the time, that it would reduce violence.
Yeah.
But it did nothing. And the law is still in place, and speeding fines are one of his ways of like nailing people. I don't like government trying to change people's behavior. Government's job is not to improve our behavior. That's not what they're there for. Your parents, your friends, your community are there to try and change your behavior, not the government. And I don't like them having access to laws that are about changing people's behavior. There's something about that really rubs me up the wrong way.
No, there is a certain, like we always talk about this, there is a certain authoritarian nanny state, if you view it.
Oh yeah, that impulse is very strong, especially in the DA.
Exactly, because now you look at it, like Cape Town was ranked just as recent as 2 months ago as one of the most dangerous cities and the most criminal cities in the world, right?
Absolutely.
No, not in the, yeah. So now, like in South Africa, sorry, not in the world. But like now, we don't have alcohol on weekends, so that number increased. So it's also
no, but they tried that, it didn't work. They had to stop doing that because it was pointless.
And then you criminalize your civilians, which is a very dangerous take for government to do. That's what we did during COVID. We criminalized regular citizens. And even with this traffic fine thing, you arrested like 136 people. How many of those people are actually guilty of something? But granted, driving and like drinking and driving on the roads, very dangerous. People, I don't endorse it.
Yeah, I don't like when governments start telling you, like when they brought in the sugar tax and things like that to try and
government overreach. Yeah, government overreach.
We were talking yesterday, and I saw a lot of the comments from people that I was being very harsh. about fat people, for example. And maybe I was. I make no excuses for that, and I won't apologize for it either. But even so, it is not the job of government to try and prevent people from eating or drinking food that is bad for them.
Yeah.
Not on.
Yeah. And so it is not the government's job also to catch those people
No.
should they partake in those activities.
No, that's correct. So I know it sounds like we're speaking with a forked tongue here, but the reality is, like, governments can do what they like to prevent, like, violent crime and all of that stuff. But deep down, in South Africa anyway, a lot of our violent crime it's not government's fault, and therefore it's not, they can do what they have to in terms of following the law to its ultimate conclusion and putting people in jail if they do wrong. But you're not going to change behavior with laws. In some circumstances, it may be called for. If there is emergency, like, regulation that's brought in and all that kind of thing. I'm not unreasonable about that. But by and large, I don't like governments that try to control behavior.
So like, if we're taking this to, like, a very, like, abstract idea, like, remember when we talked to the parole guy, right? He told us that people go to prison. If they want to change, they will change. You can put them there for 20 years,
Correct.
5 days, 5 months. If they want to change, they will change. It is not the prison that makes them change. Like, there are these counseling
conversation, and
there are these counseling programs. Yeah,
that's a valid point for everything, right? I mean, if people want to be better at their job, you can incentivize them, or they can be self-motivated. And guess which ones you'd rather have working for you?
The self-motivated,
the self-motivated one.
I like what you said about communities build the backbone of society.
Right.
If you go back, and then you go back, communities, smaller communities, families. That's how you build it. You build it from the family, and then it grows.
And there are ways to incentivize people to behave better, but again, do you really want this nanny state situation where government they don't have real things to do, like border control or defending the country and the sovereignty of the country, or providing healthcare and basic education, because they've got all that under control. So they start involving themselves in whether you smoke or not. That's not good.
Exactly.
And luckily, our governments are so bad at everything that they may make these laws, but they can't always enforce them.
Exactly. It's like even the role of policemen. Policemen step in when something has gone wrong, but policemen don't stop the wrong from happening.
Yep. And remember, as people don't like to be reminded, most of the rape and murder in this country is committed by someone who is known to the victim.
I think something like close to 80% is
correct.
Basically,
so that means this is happening in families. It's happening within neighborhoods. So these are not like strangers who are walking along the street and suddenly go, "Oh, I feel like murdering someone," and then they like go up and just randomly stab someone. Of course, those things happen, but they're rare. Most of the crime in this country is committed by people who are known by the victim. That's a very scary thing for us to face up to.
Exactly. And we can't police that because we're not there 24/7, unless the alternative is what? The nanny state, where we put a policeman outside your door, I guess.
Right. And sometimes, as Australians might have experienced during COVID, inside your house. They come into your house and tell you what to do in your own house.
Well, Becky Taylor tried that, like told us to sleep at bed at 9.
Yeah, remember, get into bed you must be asleep by 9. Remember that childish nonsense, please. And if anyone took him seriously, you need to have your head read. Yeah, exactly. All right, we've got a couple of news headlines to get to before we speak to JJ Cornish. Let's take a look at those. Apparently, 3 gun-wielding thieves in Colorado in the US allegedly robbed a check cashing business, but before they could escape, a 4th person stole their getaway car. So this is where the criminals turn on the criminals. This is very, very funny. Commerce City Police arrested 2 of the 3 suspects on Saturday, describing the series of events as an unexpected and ironic twist. No kidding. Adding to the irony, their car may have already been stolen. We don't know, the police said. Car thefts have been on the rise in the US, up nearly 11% in 2022, according to the latest FBI data. Police say an investigation in this case is ongoing. Imagine being a thief and then other thieves foil your plan.
Hey, Gareth,
There's
there's
no
a
one to
saying,
blame, right?
no honor amongst thieves.
No, exactly.
But like, it kills me though. Like, speaking about arrests, I don't know. Do you know this major actor, Jonathan Majors? He was in like the latest Marvel stuff. I think like Ant-Man
No.
and something else. This guy like had a booming year this past year, right? But he got
Yeah.
arrested because like violent, like what we were talking about. He hit his girlfriend, right? Got arrested. Disney just fired him right now. And this will blow up the entire thing because their entire runway of movies was just planned around this man. And this man
Oh shit.
and this man just got
So
convicted
what was he arrested for?
assault, first degree.
Oh my god.
Yeah.
What did you say his name was? I don't know this guy.
Jonathan Majors, man. Such a handsome man. Very great actor, but like, yo. So like all his
sometimes I have to look these people up, otherwise I have no idea.
But now it brings up in America because America is so polarized, right? So again, this man did a crime.
Okay, I know who this is.
This man did a crime, got convicted for a crime by a jury of his peers, and then America's debating, oh no, they're just going after him because he's black. No, they're going after him because he's a criminal. Oh no, no, we side with the
story.
woman.
This is okay. So here's the whole thing, because I didn't know about this until you brought it up now. But Marvel Studios and the Walt Disney Corporation have ended their relationship with actor Jonathan Majors after he's convicted of assaulting and harassing Grace Jabari, his then girlfriend.
Yeah.
He has been on a rapid career descent, and he's only 34 years old, right? He was arrested in March after getting into a heated conflict with Jabari in a chauffeured SUV on their way to his apartment in New York. He was convicted on Monday of two of the four offenses. During the 2-week trial, a Manhattan jury heard 4 days worth of testimony from the ex, who said that things between her and Majors turned physical after he had been getting texts on his phone from someone else. So she obviously got upset.
Yeah,
and she was like, show me the phone. Yeah. Right. And then he was like, don't touch my phone, bitch. And
have you seen how big I am?
Yeah, right. And this is what he looks like, by the way. So if you're wondering who this is that we're talking about. But of course, in America, everything is like down to the guy's race. So there he is. That's Jonathan Majors. So now because he's black, there are a whole lot of people going, oh, you just do this because he's a black man. And that's got nothing to do with it. And his girlfriend was black too. And she's the one who brought all the charges. Right?
But like, it also brings the hypocrisy of this whole culture, Gareth, because Amber Heard is starring in a movie like next month. But she did the exact same stuff to Johnny Depp.
And some would say even worse. Remember, didn't she shit the bed?
Exactly.
Look, this is the problem. If you base all your movies on a certain star and then it doesn't work, then you only have yourself to blame as a studio. I mean, I disagree, Bakh'abantu Snipes. He wasn't that good in Creed, and he was the worst in Ant-Man. And apparently, SM says no, his girlfriend was white, actually.
What, Amari Jabari?
Grace Jabari. She doesn't sound very white to me, but there we go. Wonder what she looks like. Let me look her up quickly. I love this. This is like, I don't care about these people at all. So when I hear about them,
Gareth.
She's a white girl.
Like, besides that, basing your entire.
What does she look like? She looks like.
She looks like Britney Spears after the drug. Oh, sorry, no, I can't say that.
I don't know. She's not bad looking. I think she's quite pretty. Anyway, so this is her. Just because I didn't realize she was white either. So that's him. Now you get to see her. Are you ready, everybody? This is exciting. We get to see these people for the first time this morning. If you don't know the story at all, like me, then this is great news. So here she is. That's her. Yeah, she's not a bad-looking girl. So she got all jealous because he had some other girl texting him.
Yeah. So like I was going to say, Gareth, like the hypocrisy, not just basing your movie industry around one person. It's basing a movie industry under this ideology that is so flawed because you guys can't keep it consistent amongst your own selves. This woke thing about like, because now if they didn't care, right? Because this happened about 10 years ago with Josh Brolin, who was Thanos, and no one batted an eye when they cast him as one of the biggest villains in the world. So the hypocrisy, man, just rings true.
And then I see Trevor Noah is trending this morning. I'm not sure why, but maybe about some joke he made about pala pala. I'm not entirely sure. So, by the way, pala pala comes up in my conversation with LJ Fenter, which will play out on Thursday. Big stories that he's revealing in that interview. Big stories. Plot twist, says SM. Jonathan Majors came to court with a black new girlfriend, Megan Good, during the trial. So we went back to the black tribe. You see, again, like the guy can't just date a girl. It's all about her race suddenly as well.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And the reason that Trevor's trending, he's got a new Netflix special out.
Didn't Trevor's people try to cancel Trevor for being also racist, even though black people can't be racist according to the same narrative?
And Trevor did a very interesting deal with Spotify.
Yeah.
To put out a podcast this year, which I think he's getting $4 million for.
Yeah, didn't he steal your name? What now?
Yeah, he did. That's right. He stole the name of the TV show that we did on ENCA last year. What now? There we go. So, Trevor, don't stop stealing other people's stuff, Trevor.
Trevor, you got in trouble last time you stole people's jokes.
Yeah, exactly. People got very upset about that. No, his new special on Netflix is called Where Was I? So that's totally different to the podcast.
Yeah.
But that's coming out. And of course, I mean, how many times he hosted the Grammys? Like 4 times?
Yeah, like no, man's made it up there. Yeah,
he's done well. He's done very, very well.
Well, granted, no one watches the Grammys, so is it well, Gareth?
No. Do you know anyone who watches the Grammys?
Exactly.
No.
Sure.
But it doesn't matter. He's still a good host, even if no one's watching.
Oh, but like I'm sure, like if I was him, my greatest achievement would have been hosting the presidential dinner at the White House, the correspondence dinner.
Oh, that also, I don't know if that's still a big deal. I mean, because Joe Biden's not even conscious.
Like Joe Biden's sleeping through the set.
Did you see what happened? I think it was yesterday, and it could have been in New York or in Washington. He was coming out of a place, and someone shouted at him and said, "Why are your approval ratings so low in the polls at the moment, Mr. President? And Donald Trump's are so high." And he shouted back at them and said, "You're reading the wrong polls." And then suddenly, like someone crashed into his motorcade, and all you hear is like this crash, and then all his bodyguards like gather around him because they obviously thought, "Oh, someone's trying to kill him," but it was probably just a drunk driver or something. No one's trying to kill him.
Come on, time will do that for us.
Exactly. You don't have to do anything. You just have to wait. You want to kill Joe Biden? Just hang around. Just wait.
There's this great press interview of Joe Biden. He has an important, he's like, this is the most important security announcement ever. He leans over to the mic because he also does that whisper thing. And he's like, just forget about it. Forget about it.
I don't know what you mean, man. Weird. He's just such a weirdo. All right, let's talk about this quickly because I saw this. This was something that you've watched. I've never seen MILF Manor. What is MILF Manor? Because when Ben came on the show about 3 weeks ago, he told Simpiwe and I about that reality. It's like a reality property company. They selling sunsets or something, and he says basically it's these prostitutes who are like selling houses in like Los Angeles or famous American cities, and it's these women who wear just about no clothing, and then they go around selling houses. But Ben is convinced they're just machoshas.
No, they are, and we need to talk about how Ben hates white women, middle-aged white women. We need to talk about that.
But hang on, so you tell me what MILF Manor is. This is something I don't know.
So this was my weekend, Gareth. So I'm sitting. Okay, cool. I was invited to a friend thing, right? Roller skating. I took a rain check and that. And then
roller skating.
Roller skating somewhere in Bryanston. But I was like, okay, cool. I'm just gonna watch TV. I just need to catch up on myself, right? And then I stumble. I have DSTV, so I stumble on the Learning Channel, TLC. As I'm watching TLC, MILF Manor Omnibus comes up. It's got like 5 episodes. So obviously you have to watch this thing. The premise is we bring in, I think 5 or 6 these like MILFs, like the oldest one is 59. So it's like 50 to 60.
Yeah.
And then the concept of the show is that they're going to hook up with these boys. Plot twist, episode 1, we find out the boys that they're gonna hook up with are their sons. Obviously, not
Oh,
like they're not.
Jesus.
Obviously, they're not gonna hook up with their sons, but they're in a mansion, trapped together. Think bachelor style, but the pool of dating is your mom's age group.
It's all the different mums'
It's all the
children.
different
and then-
moms.
oh my God, that is so sick.
Have
Have
and
we
you
run
have
out
these,
of ideas?
and then on the first challenge is that you're supposed to like put on a blindfold these women, right? And they're supposed to touch these boys and figure out which one's their son. I'm like, okay,
Oh,
cool.
no.
I'm
No. No,
I'm like,
look, have we reached the bottom of the barrel
yes, we have.
with reality TV where MILF, we know what MILF stands for, right?
Yeah.
So if you don't know what MILF stands for, this is like outrageously bad taste. And people actually volunteer to be on this show.
Everyone was like super on board. Like, okay, there was one guy who was like, I didn't know like this was the premise of the show. So he's
Oof.
like, yeah, so he's talked about, but okay, cool. Now that we're here. And they're in Mexico, right? Because they're not allowed to drink. So these kids are like under like, I think most of them are under 21, but they're allowed to drink in Mexico.
Oh my God.
And you have these old women just salivating over these boys when your son is right there. And then kicker is at the end of the episode, we find out that they share rooms with their moms. So you have to tell your son, the other boy is coming through, so don't sleep here. And then this one kid is having a debate like, Mom, can you not sleep with anyone while I'm in the room? The mom is like, I don't know.
Dude. Oh, that's so bad. Eesh. Are these people, Dr. Hanan should be like, he would have a field day with these people.
Like,
right?
Doesn't make sense. It's not okay.
But also, I've got to question the sort of people who would put this show together and then the kind of people who would watch it, because clearly there's a market for this.
Clearly there's a market for it. Also, the people would enter this competition because these people like bar none, Gareth, these people are excited to be here. Like,
this goes back to that terrible, the ugly reality of like, people want to be famous, right?
Yeah.
People really want to be famous and they really want to be on TV and they'll do anything. Imagine signing up for a show called MILF Manor.
Exactly. Like what self-respecting person.
Mom, and your mom is going to be like, behaving like a slut on TV. This is just so sad. What a sad idea.
Yep.
I don't even know where to start with stuff like this. What's the upshot? Like
what's the best case scenario? Like,
so you'll be famous.
You're right. What's the upsell? Like you'll be famous for that.
So you'll be famous.
Like, you want to be announced as Gareth Cliff, star of MILF Manor?
Oh my God.
Do you win the show? Is love the prize? Because it's definitely not.
But so what do they win? $1 million or something?
There is no prize, Gareth. This is just the premise of the show.
God.
Granted, I didn't finish it. It's just to be on TV.
To be on TV with your mom.
With your mom.
Oh, wow. Oof. Society is hurtling towards Armageddon at the most aliens? Incredible rate.
Like the amount of profanities are discussed like in the comments.
Oh man. This is a new low. I thought that Selling Sunsets show was a bad idea, but this takes the cake. This is way worse.
Worst reality show ever. And I'm like, there's people who consume this content on a daily basis, right? Not bashing reality TV watchers, but I don't get it. Just watching people just like this is the lowest. So there's this channel, Gareth, right? Sorry, I just lost my train of thought. But like there's this channel.
I'm interested in how this happens, and I want to know what the psychology is of people who would watch this, because you can blame the producers all you like, but the reality is there's an audience for market. They found the market.
The biggest channel on DSTV, according to this article that I read, is that it was Moja Love, and Moja Love is just black people airing their dirty laundry on TV. No solution in sight. Nothing besides the cameras there, and you're just embarrassing yourself. And it's this need from the people starring on the show to be on TV, and it's this us watching society at its lowest version. This is not art. This is not entertainment. This is we're just watching the decay of society rot in real life.
How disappointing. It's just, is this what we've, if the aliens invaded now and they saw MILF Manor, they'd get back on their ships and they'd go right the hell back where they came from.
Yep.
Unbelievable. All right, let's turn our attention to important stuff. Otherwise, I mean, if we get stuck in MILF Manor, I'm never going to get out of this. This is depressing beyond belief. Okay, so Africanalysis has been with us all year, and we are going to be, I'm very happy to say, starting a brand new season of Africanalysis next year with JJ Cornish, and of course the Johannesburg Business School, who, if you haven't seen what they do, you need to go and check them out. Go and look at what the Johannesburg Business School is up to. Go and look at what they do with their MBA graduates. It's absolutely phenomenal. They're also extremely interested in what's happening in the rest of Africa. Why? Because they're a smart business school who realize that Africa is one of the places where they have not yet, where markets have not been entirely exploited, where there are huge numbers of consumers, where there is massive opportunity. And the Joburg Business School is at the forefront of discovering these new markets, making sense of them. That's one of the reasons that they bring us Africanalysis every 2 weeks. JJ Cornish, of course, is the most informed guy we could find on the continent when it comes to looking at all the important current affairs from all over: elections, the economies of various countries, the state of play in the continent, Francophone and Anglophone Africa, and so many other things. So we get to spend time with him every 2 weeks. And today is our last episode of the year. So we welcome, as always, Jean-Jacques Cornish. How are you, sir?
Bonjour to you, Gareth. If maybe next year you can fit me in next to some other kind of insert, because your last one, the only way I have of expressing anything about that is ain't got no class.
Oh, wow. That's the best, because, yeah, I'm sorry that we even had to talk about that before bringing you on. Unbelievable, right? So let's talk, JJ, about basically about the year in review, because there's quite a lot that's happened in current affairs in Africa in the last couple of months. There's always news. There's news breaking here, there, and everywhere. We've got elections to talk about, as I mentioned just a moment ago. But you've got some things that you want to talk to us about on the last day of Africanalysis. So where do we begin?
Well, I thought, because I know you like lists.
I love lists.
And because your viewers and listeners love lists. And yes. I've got Africa's 10 richest countries. Now, that's something.
Excellent.
We start the richest country, and by a little way, is Nigeria. Now, I often argue with that because they have grown-up problems. But it's Nigeria, number one, with a GDP of 477 billion, gross domestic product.
Wow.
South Africa comes in second with 409 billion. Egypt is third with 405. And then it starts falling off. We have Algeria, 228 billion. Morocco, 142 billion. Well, in fact, Angola's ahead of Morocco with 163 billion. And then Morocco, and then Ethiopia, 111.3. Then Kenya, then Ghana, and then Tanzania. Now, why do I doubt Nigeria? Is that, Nigeria has inflation currently at 25.8%. It has sluggish growth, millions in poverty there, inadequate infrastructure. They've got tariff and trade and non-tariff barriers on trade. And the infrastructure, is a lack of it in the country. We talk about, every time we put up a mall, a Nigerian says to me, we don't even have anything like that in Nigeria. You have, 2 or 3 per city, or more than that per city. There's a lack of confidence in the currency in Nigeria, and a limitation on foreign exchange. So they have these problems. But interestingly, at COP28, the biggest con job on the planet, COP, it always is.
Definitely.
They have this meeting. And then what do? My goodness, they go over the deadline. They've done it 28 times. They go over the deadline. And then after a day and a half of stopping the clock, as they like to call it, they suddenly come up with a quotes breakthrough. Well, I mean, after the COP in Durban, I said I will never cover another one, because it's a con job of the people. But worst of all, it's a con job of the media, and they make me want to tell you there's been a breakthrough when there hasn't been, and there wasn't at this last one either. So it's very, very, very sad. But there were these countries talking. Well, there was a nuance on fossil fuels. But when we have countries like Nigeria, we have countries like Algeria, we have countries like Ghana, that all have fossil fuels in the country. Nigeria put it quite well, saying, if you want to have this fall down in the fossil fuels before we've been able to enrich ourselves properly, it's like putting us on life support, but not allowing us to breathe. But yes. I mean, anyway. So there was this dichotomy. Everybody said we had to. You can't use the phrase "phase out," so you had to transition away from. And it was really an exercise in gymnastics of word gymnastics, and it was really awful. Absolute. Yeah. But
JJ, I'm so glad that you're saying this stuff, because I, for one, am sick to death of seeing these endless summits where world leaders pitch up. They sit and they talk to each other. They stay in 5-star hotels. The taxpayers of those countries are forced to cough up. And then we are told how bad we are for driving cars, for running businesses, for using electricity, by a bunch of leaders who realize at some level, they must realize that they're self-conscious frauds, right? So they're aware of the fact that they're lying, that the only way your country develops, the only way that things get better for people in that country, the only way you raise people out of poverty is by having abundant energy, by creating opportunities for business, by allowing people to trade as freely as possible. And yet these guys get together to do exactly the opposite. And then they thumb their noses at us from there.
Well, I've got one interesting element from this COP 28, and they started with this damage fund and said we will pay those countries affected by climate change. Well, Africa, for example, do you know that in terms of carbon emissions, Africa is responsible for 4% of the world's carbon emissions? And if you take us, the freedom-loving People's Republic of South Africa, out of that, then the contribution by the rest of the continent is virtually negligible. But they've decided that they've got to pay. They started on day one agreeing to pay this amount. Do you know that COP 15 in Copenhagen, so work it out, that's 15 years ago, they decided to pay compensation to small countries and developing countries affected by climate change? We have yet to have that paid. We have yet to have them honor that promise from 15 years ago. So COP is such a con job. It should be called Con 17 and Con 18 and Con 19. It really is shameful.
Crooked.
The way they, crooked. Really frightful.
Crooked. There's no other way to put it. Okay, so JJ, when these people get together, you've been to some of these summits. You said you've reported on them and you refuse to do it now. Just tell us what kinds of things these leaders get up to. Because most of us will never attend a Davos or a COP28 or a G20 summit or any of these various meetings that these people are flown to and are put up at, and then sit around and basically are mocking everyone else on earth. Well, what do they do? What do these guys do? They have dinners? What do they do?
Well, they have dinners. They have talk shops. They talk and talk and talk. Now, I am an inveterate multilateralist. I believe that multilateral politics is the only thing short of war so I for example support the United Nations, and I get irritated by people saying, well, what are the United Nations doing about it? The United Nations is a vast organization, and you can't say what are they doing about it when you don't know which bodies are in play. But it has shown itself to be, unfortunately, completely toothless of late. Look what they are doing on Ukraine. Nothing, because of the veto. So we say we need to end the invasion or the war against Ukraine, and everybody says yes, and they all agree. Now, the point is, it's non-binding if the General Assembly says or does something. It's non-binding. As it happens, Gareth, what we were talking about, COP, is non-binding too. You know, everybody says, so are they going to implement what they decided at COP? Everybody laughs. Those in the know laugh and say, no, this is the United Nations. They'll try and put moral pressure on and so on. But there's nothing. The only binding things that the United Nations does are by the Security Council under Chapter 7. And that is, for example, sanctions that they can apply, but nothing else. And of course, if it's not in the Security Council, then it has no muscle whatever. Look at Israel, when the world saying we've got to have a ceasefire. We've got 20,000 innocent Palestinians killed now in Gaza. There has to be a ceasefire. Then the United States says, well, no, you can't have a ceasefire because that will play into Hamas's hands. So they support their friend in that area, Israel, and so nothing can be done. Of course, Britain, even worse, in their craven way, just abstain. They don't even cast the veto. When I was at the United Nations, had 3 countries, Britain, France, and the United States, the 3 Western permanent members of the Security Council, repeatedly casting vetoes supporting apartheid South Africa. But that was the time of the Cold War. They were fighting effectively against Russia, you see. And so if Russia wanted something, they had to oppose that. So it was a silly game. The only time the triple protection veto from the Western powers fell was after the death of Steve Biko and the banning of the world newspaper, and when the apartheid regime just went too far, and they brought in sanctions, but not the sanctions that were called for. They brought in an arms embargo, a mandatory arms embargo, and because they said, we can't have South Africa being that dangerous.
Well, you talk about
so it worked there.
You talk about the UN and the Security Council and the veto powers of the major powers, but at least those are major powers. When Russia or China or America or the UK, for whatever reason, they're still on that list of major powers. I don't think they are anymore. But anyway, those are the countries that founded the UN, that were the members of the Security Council from the beginning. At least those countries carry some weight. There are military consequences to their decisions. There are economic consequences to their decisions. What I think is so ridiculous about the UN is that the president of Burkina Faso gets up there and starts lecturing the world about what's wrong. And nobody's interested in what Burkina Faso have to say. How does South Africa line up? How do we square up at the UN? Because for a while, wasn't Phumzile Mlambo Ngcuka, she was the head of the UN's, what was it? Human Rights Commission or Department of Women and whatever it was.
Dealing with women's rights. What you're talking about there is what Daniel Patrick Moynihan, the US ambassador at the time I was there, used to call the tyranny of the majority. But you've got to remember that whatever Burkina Faso or the smaller nations have to say is at the General Assembly. And even when they get the vote at the General Assembly, it doesn't matter because it just has moral weight, but nothing more than that. So
wasn't like Iran were in charge of like their women's rights for a little while. Iran, really.
Well, when you have the Human Rights Commission, then they had all sorts of people coming on, and they do it by blocks. The Africans decide who will represent Africa on these bodies. Now, South Africa has done well in the new South Africa, democratic South Africa, 3 times on the Security Council. But what we learned there is that you can make some friends, but you can certainly make some very serious enemies too. And so it's a fraught business. But when they want to enlarge the Security Council, then clearly countries that have real muscle, like Japan and Germany, should come on. And when that happens, the Italians kept on an ambassador way past retirement because he was very, very, very good at this. And I'm sorry, his name has just escaped me. I was smuggled into the delegates' lounge at one of the summits in South Africa to go and interview him. And as I was interviewing him, he was looking at the woman passing more than talking to me. But anyway, his point, the point he made very astutely was, if you are going to increase the Security Council by including the losers of the Second World War, i.e. Japan and Germany, then you've got to include us too, Italy. So,
yeah,
but it's never happened. You know, they wanted South Africa to be on, and of course, who would be on if we came on? South Africa, of course, wouldn't say, yes, we want to, wouldn't throw its hat in the ring, we want to. They would say, well, we need 2 from Africa. And then suddenly countries like China and Russia, who were prepared to take on 1 Africa, just lost their appetite for this. So, I mean, you know, we're talking about the UN Security Council instead of the richest African nations, but perhaps at the end of the year, that's not a bad thing. But it's a body that if it didn't exist, well, you know, I think I would fear the worst for the world. But sometimes the way it behaves, you wonder what it is really worth, and whether it's worth the money that countries pay. In fact, not all the countries do pay. That's the point.
Yeah,
you know,
that's another thing. That's
don't
worth
pay their
discussing.
subs. Yeah, but you know, here you have the multilateral system is severely under threat at the moment. In Africa, we have the peacekeepers in the Congo. Well, they have the elections this week in the Congo. They are moving out. The political force in Sudan has moved out because the United Nations cannot be where the authorities in that country don't want them to be, and that the military regime in Sudan says, we don't want you here. So the United Nations says, okay, we're not abandoning you, Sudan, but we're getting out. And you know, so this is something I'm looking at very much with Lilian Schlapper, who I'm writing the book, sort of talking about South African foreign policy, sort of pegged to his quite amazing career. And he's not well at the moment, but that's the one area that we've still got to go through is the damage and the threat to the multilateral system, which I think is the greatest threat to world order and to the future of this world. Perhaps not as great as is climate change, but certainly it's nipping at its heels.
All right, well, we'll agree to leave that one alone for the rest of 2023, JJ. But let's go to your list. I think this is quite an exciting thing to talk about. So you've already mentioned which countries have the biggest economies.
Yes.
South Africa used to be at the top of that list. We've been superseded by Nigeria, and I know Egypt is nipping on our heels as well.
Yes.
Why have we lost prominence? Why have we lost market share, so to speak, on the continent? It used to be that South Africa was the gateway to the rest of Africa. We represented an opportunity for multinational corporations, international business, other governments to make their way into Africa and to access this incredible market. Have we lost political clout? Is that part of the problem? Have we slowed our economy because of things like energy abundance? Have we slowed our economy to the point where we're not taken seriously by major players in the market? What is it that we've miscalculated and done wrong so that we should end up no longer being the most important market in Africa?
Well, you know, bear in mind that South Africa once sold electrical power all the way up to Ethiopia. We were the power that the country that lit up. You know, we lit the streets of a city with electrical power before any other countries in the world. And this is the Eskom and corporations like that. Well, of course, that's gone. We can't even keep the power on in our own country at the moment. The moral weight that a democratic South Africa had has diminished completely. We're unable to speak to Africa with the authority that we once had, or that we briefly had in the Mandela period, and to a large extent in the Mbeki period. And so we've lost that, and we go along. We're still considered within Africa as being something. And this area of the gateway, it was much abused. But yes, you want to get into sub-Saharan Africa, then you probably have to come through South Africa still. But it's parlous the way the South Africans, the situation has fallen off. Nigeria, of course, the oil has done the job there. and it's going to be, according to the list I have, it will be the top country for some time to come, despite the problems it is having. Egypt, of course, nipping at South Africa's heels, absolutely. I mean, I was once used to ask, is Egypt really an African country? Because, it's Middle Eastern as well. It could be part of that, but it is there. And they've just had this election with Abdel Fattah el-Sisi winning the election. The announcement was overnight with something like 90% of the vote. Well, when you get figures like that, you worry about the democracy.
That always sounds very suspicious, right?
Yeah. I mean, beaten only by Kim Il-sung and people like that. But well, who got 102% of the vote. But no, it's very sad. But they had quite a big turnout, 66%. But they have record inflation, depreciating currency, forex crippling, crunch on foreign exchange, and there's 67 million registered voters. Had very little choice. Abdel Fattah el-Sisi's number one opponent left the field some months ago, complaining that he'd been intimidated and so on. So there was sort of three in line, but he won it. So that's, when you were speaking about your election 101, and that's what I was saying. It's all very well to say, yes, we've had elections every 5 years, but what has led up to those, and what is the result? You can fool with elections, and that's certainly what he's been doing. He threw out Mohamed Morsi. I was election observer for Mohamed Morsi's election, and whatever problems you might have had with him, he was fairly elected. And now Abdel Fattah el-Sisi's had this constitutional change after a referendum. So he's got his terms have been increased to 6 years from 4 years, but he's only allowed 2 of them. But the first one, and many African leaders have done that, doesn't actually count. That doesn't count as one of the terms. So he's going to be in power till 2020. We have then, when we get to other countries like Algeria, in every case, they have real inflationary pressure and commodity price increases because of the Russian invasion or the Russian war against the Ukraine.
Well,
so yeah,
I'm going to have to draw this to a close. I'm sad to say, because I know there's so much more that we could talk about, but we do have a whole year of Africanalysis ahead of us in the new year. And JJ, I hope you will have a very happy Christmas and New Year, and we will see you in 2024.
Well, let me say to everyone, joyeux Noël et bonne année. Happy Christmas, joyous Christmas, and a happy New Year.
Thank you, JJ, and all the best to you. We'll see you in 2024.
Looking forward to it.
Omelette de fromage, JJ.
Cheers. Bye-bye.
You know what he is.
Every time you listen to that 80s show, Tom Cruise lives another 10 years. Every Friday on CliffCentral.com, Paolo and Dory review movies, reminisce about old songs, remember childhood places that are now car parks, and say some outrageously rude things about Patrick Swayze's brother. That 80s show, new episode every Friday, live or as a podcast on CliffCentral.com.
And when you go into this process world, it becomes a way of life. There's no end point. You will continually be refining. You will continually be improving your processes in your actual business. A good place to start, do your shopping properly and understand what your end goal is. Shop properly, do your homework, understand what you want. What is the end game of looking at process in your organization? Is it around compliance management? Is it about automation? Is it about visibility of process? Is it around standardization? Have an end goal in mind and then go for it.
Thanks for listening to Unbundled, brought to you by Catalytic, a series that aims to demystify technology so that you can make smarter decisions for your business. Remember that you can listen to all of the episodes on the Cliff Central app or website. And for added convenience, you can subscribe to the podcast on Apple, Spotify, Google, or wherever you listen. And remember, if you're looking for help with communications tools in your business, please make sure to visit catalytic.co.za.
Indeed. And thank you very much, Yaku. He will also be back in the new year with more episodes of Catalytic. And if you'd like to know more, you can find out all of that on cliffcentral.com. So we launched a new show a couple of days ago called Democracy 101 in the lead up to our elections. It's kind of an important part of what we want to do going into the new year, because I think that these elections, it's not just my opinion, it's a lot of people's opinion, these elections are going to be probably the most important ones since 1994. And many people have the opinion that these could be the ones, these could be the decisions, these elections could bring about the decisions that will really change the course of direction for South Africa. Certainly, I hope so. The course of direction for us in the last couple of years has been decidedly downward. And today we're going to be joined by someone who can hopefully shed some light. He certainly has been one of those people who has added enormous value when we've had him on the Burning Platform before. But in Democracy 101 for today, we're going to speak to Wayne Susman, who's an independent election analyst. We thought we'd pick his brain a little bit today. There's so much to talk about. So Wayne, first of all, welcome and nice to see you.
Thank you. Good morning, Gareth. Good morning, Bantu Bonke.
Do you agree, by the way, that the upcoming elections here in South Africa are going to be pivotal, decisive, all of those words that the analysts like to throw around? Or are we just going into another election cycle where we can expect more of the same? I certainly get the feeling that on the street and when I have conversations with people and looking at the comments on this show, people are enthusiastic about these elections in a way that they haven't been for the last few.
100%. I definitely think this is the most pivotal elections in South Africa since 1994. The length of the ballot paper speaks volumes. You've got many new entrants running this time who believe they can shape up this elections. Some of them, by the way, I think are running because they've seen what parties with 1 or 2 seats can do in our metros. So I'm not saying everyone's running for little reasons. But Gareth, I think it's going to be an absolutely pivotal election. And it's the first election since our democracy where the ANC is under real threat in our 3 most urban provinces and also on our national ballot.
So Wayne, let's just talk about something that happened this week. We know that Jacob Zuma has launched, or rather has thrown his support behind a party that we didn't even know existed up to a couple of days ago called the Umkhonto we Sizwe Party. We know Umkhonto we Sizwe was the ANC's armed wing during the struggle. I don't know who's in charge of this party. I don't know who the main players are. But Duduzile Zuma, who's his daughter, came out and said, no, the former president is not going to support the ANC, nor will he campaign for them ahead of these elections. Do you have any thoughts on that? Because it's been a very muted response in the media generally. And I do think that the ANC are probably more worried than they're letting on about this.
Correct, Gareth. And also we've seen the formation of Roger Jardine's party. I think middle of December, there's so much happening. I wonder if it's the best time to launch a political party, especially when the elections are bound to be, we're hearing May next year. Running an election, particularly in South Africa, vast, it's a large country, rural settings, urban settings, 9 provinces, many different languages. It's a complicated thing to get a party going. By the way, we heard some months ago that this MK party was registered to the IEC, and that's why it's important to monitor these things. And I was wondering, and I was obviously proven wrong, that is this some kind of red herring? Why is there this MK party being formed? Will Jacob Zuma really go along with it? Well, he has gone along with it. Look, Jacob Zuma is older today, certainly than he was in 2009, where he captured the hearts and minds of many voters, particularly those in KwaZulu-Natal. And he's older today than he was when he ran for his second term in 2014. Will he have the energy? Does he still have the relevance? This is a question not just for Jacob Zuma, but also someone for Ace Magashule. These are veterans in our political stage. Do they have the energy? Do they have that ability to connect with first-time voters? One thing about Jacob Zuma, and I always say this in politics, is focus is absolutely critical. It's absolutely vital that when I hear a new party say we're going to go after every town and township and informal settlement in South Africa, we're going to win the votes in Bazan in the Eastern Cape to Boksburg and Ekurhuleni, that's not the answer I typically like to hear. I like to hear parties who are focused, because I think then they have a clear game plan. If Jacob Zuma is going to be very focused in KwaZulu-Natal, I do think, and the MK party, I do think they can let on better. If they have a proper strategy, then possibly they can not just hurt the ANC, by the way, but also a party which is at a largely great 2023, the IFP as well.
Yes.
I want to play a little clip quickly. This is something that Ryan found yesterday. Thabo Mbeki had some things to say about why he won't be campaigning for the ANC, and I thought this is quite hard-hitting. First of all, I haven't seen Thabo Mbeki speak for some time, and he's certainly, you mentioned Jacob Zuma being older. Thabo Mbeki is really in his twilight years now, and the fact that he's being brought out and that he feels the need to speak out about the state of the ANC is telling in itself. But listen to these words, and then I'd like to hear your thoughts on this, and yours, Bakh'abantu, because I think that this is probably a very scary proposition for the ANC to deal with. Two former presidents, Jacob Zuma, who we've discussed, and now Thabo Mbeki, saying things that they probably don't want stalwarts and leaders and elders like these two saying. Take a listen to this.
I don't think the ANC understands that reality. It is true that you have got many greedy people, many corrupt people. If I ask the question, why is the ANC, which marginalized people, as we were saying, why is it behaving like this? I say to the ANC comrades that when you say I must go campaigning next year, to say to people, vote ANC, how am I going to do that? To say, vote ANC, when I know very well that the branch of the ANC in this constituency is led by a criminal. You can't. It's not possible to go and say vote ANC for a criminal.
So obviously he's not talking just about that one municipality or that one place, but he says greedy, criminals. These are things that you could not say this stuff a couple of years ago, right?
Correct. And again, Thabo Mbeki, you could see in that video, is also no longer a spring chicken. Let me just put it out there.
No.
So this is the juxtaposition, Gareth and Bakh'abantu. Basically, what we are seeing is, let's go back a few days ago to Mavuso Msimang. I thought that this would be a consequential decision. Here's an ANC luminary, a person whose blood is black, green, and yellow, who said that he could no longer support the ANC. A few days later, he walks back that statement and rejoins the ANC. Also, what was telling for me was the launch of Roger Jardine's party. And again, he
Sorry,
also
let's
has
just if you don't mind, on Mavuso Msimang, I mean, clearly then his credibility's shot after that, because he's been pressured to say, oh, no, I didn't mean that. But no one believes him now, right?
Yeah, his credibility is shot, but there's that old adage that it's very cold outside the ANC. You see many, we've seen a number of politicians, of elected, of members of parliament, councillors, leave the DA over the last few years. Yeah, you have someone who isn't even a current office holder. Of course, he's benefited from his association with the ANC and his links to the ANC. But my understanding, there's no current benefit to being linked to the ANC, who after a few days, yes, his credibility is shot. But at the end of the day, it just shows that it's much harder to leave the ANC than any other political party. I mean, besides for Malema, I'm battling to think of anyone else who's done successfully over the last few years. And this is going to be the challenge for Zuma, with regards to Thabo Mbeki's speech. This isn't the first time he's done this. I think in 2016, there was that backhanded compliment of an endorsement of the ANC. I don't know, or it was 2021. It was a very feeble endorsement. But ultimately, it's, even though I think Gary emerging in a place in our society, you just showed a video of Thabo Mbeki. Think back to those elections in 2004. The ANC was the dominant actor in society, whether it was business, civil society, sport, arts and culture. Just think of musicians who were endorsing an opposition party in 2004, 2009. Very few and far between. Media, every facet of society in 2004, 2009, the ANC, particularly 2004, the ANC is utterly dominant. That started to fray over the last few years. That's what makes this election very, very interesting. But I wonder, just back to the point, is whether Thabo Mbeki will say this just before the elections, what we just saw in the video.
I mean, he said it, so why does it matter if he reiterates it before the elections? Are we so stupid in South Africa that we forget these things after politicians have said them? And why is it suddenly fashionable now to talk about how bad the ANC is? But they've been bad for the last couple of years and nobody said anything until very recently. Does it take a certain level of dissatisfaction for people to have the scales pulled from their eyes?
I think it does, Gareth. I think to a certain... Oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Bakh'abantu.
No, I think it does take a certain... It does take a certain level of dissatisfaction. And I think we've all reached that point where even like when you spoke to credibility of someone like Msimang, where he can't justify it anymore, where his credibility is shot because he went back with the begging bowl probably. But like someone like Thabo Mbeki, where you have been asked, how can you let this go? Where the ANC does also like invoke what's the narrative? This is the ANC of Mandela. This is the ANC of Thabo Mbeki. This is the ANC of yesteryear. But now they are still here and they have to say, no, I do not endorse this. Otherwise, it's their name.
Yeah, Wayne, do you want to add to that?
Sure, thanks, Bakh'abantu. Basically, I think this is exactly why, and I want to laud you for having this Democracy 101 session. This, and we said this at the beginning, 2021, and I know we don't often lend too much weight to local government elections, our midterms. We saw for the first time in a democratic election in South Africa, the ANC fall below 50% when all the votes were tallied. Not just below 50%, but 46%. To be honest, below, relatively well below 50%. That is why, Gareth, I think we are seeing the ANC fray. We're going to see more, again, the artists. I think back to this in 2004, 1999. You wouldn't see a prominent artist play at the concert of another political party. You're going to see that more and more. And that might be a metaphor of how the ANC is losing its grip. But again, Gareth, as I said on the Burning Platform, when I had the privilege of sitting in that show, I think it was about a year or 2 years ago, do not count the ANC out. I think there are large swaths of this country, particularly rural areas, who believe the ANC can and will do a better job than the EFF or any other political party.
Okay, so let's talk about the EFF for a second. You brought them up. People try their best to avoid the EFF, but they're a powerful player in South Africa because they're the third biggest party, but they're also often the kingmaker in regional and local elections. I mean, they don't directly run or govern any single municipality in the country, but they have tremendous influence. And Julius Malema makes a lot more noise than any other politician by weight class in this country. And then he seems to get way more attention from the media as well. So we can't ignore them, even though people say, well, they're not a major player. They don't really have policies that are noteworthy. What is your take on the EFF and whether or not people should be either paranoid or at least concerned about what they're doing?
Yeah, I mean, you're seeing in these opinion polls, the EFF's votes, some polls I think have them about 10%, 11%, others have them all the way up to 19%, running the DA close, even some scenarios that they eclipse the DA. That would be a stunning turn of events if they had to emerge as the official opposition. Look, the interesting thing, Gareth, is that Julius Malema, after Kenneth Meshwe, Monsieur Lekota, even if he runs again, and Bantu Holomisa, who I'll blame myself, but he was a reason why I butchered Bakh'abantu's name at the beginning, as I was thinking of him. Bantu Bonkwe Holomisa. These are the longest running party leaders in parliament. So Julius Malema is a veteran. This will be his third election. Leading the EFF into an election, far more experienced than the IFP leader, Cyril Ramaphosa, in that regard of leading a party into parliament. So what was interesting, what would worry me, what should be worrying the EFF is that if you look at their growth trajectory, is that a lot of that growth in 2019 and 2021 was in the province we've been speaking a lot about in this interview, and that's KwaZulu-Natal. And by the way, Jacob Zuma's MK party could even be taking away votes from the EFF in KwaZulu-Natal. So let's see. The other thing, Gareth, if you look at the EFF's results in 2021, in places like Rustenburg and Polokwane, which are key parts of the origin story of the EFF. Polokwane is where Julius Malema hails from, the Seshego township. Rustenburg is right next to Marikana. The EFF went backwards in these two municipalities in 2021. And in the three major urban centers of Gauteng, their vote either plateaus or goes backwards. So where's the EFF growing? The EFF is growing, and this is a strange anomaly in 2023. They have won wards with this, and this is a very good stat for them. They've won wards off the ANC since the 2021 local government elections. It's 5 out of the 9 provinces. It's the Western Cape, the Northern Cape, the Northwest, the Free State, and Gauteng, and Mpumalanga, 6 of the provinces. They've just got to do Limpopo, KwaZulu-Natal, and the Eastern Cape. Easier said than done. So that shows that the EFF can beat the ANC in many parts of the country. But where they're really growing, Gareth, and again, I've just them to worry about how they're doing in Gauteng and KwaZulu-Natal and Polokwane and Rustenburg. They're growing in small towns in South Africa. Now, that's hopeful. That means that they're going to 2024 knowing that they are growing in certain parts of the country. The challenge is I would much rather be growing in metro areas and in large towns and small cities than in small towns. So that's where the EFF is from an electoral perspective as we end this year.
What is happening in metros? Because we're seeing these coalition governments. Sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. What do you suspect? And again, a lot of this is asking you to, look into a crystal ball. And you're not Nostradamus, but it's certainly a more educated guess than most of us would have. What do you think is going to happen in the major metros, particularly Johannesburg, Tshwane, Port Elizabeth, Cape Town? I think is pretty much a done deal, and the DA, if they continue to run it properly, don't face any credible or serious threats in Cape Town. But are there others like eThekwini, Durban that may surprise us, or are these also going to be predictable results?
Yeah, so why are we talking about metros is because there's obviously large reservoirs of votes there. They're going to be consequential in this election. Are we going to see this urban-rural split continue? So when it comes to Gauteng, which has 3 metros, Johannesburg, Ekurhuleni, and Tshwane, what's been an interesting feature, Gareth, of our politics in 2022 and 2023 is that at present, and I always say political parties can turn things around if they work hard and change the trajectory, the ANC in trouble with black voters in Gauteng. This is clear from by-elections in Soweto, by-elections in the West Rand, places like the Reeds in Centurion, where there's quite a number of black voters, small pockets of Randburg. In I think all but one by-election in Gauteng, the ANC share amongst black voters has continued to decline. And I think this is one of the big worries for the ANC going into the 2024 election year. With regards to Cape Town, look, Mayor Jordan Hillis has built a very big profile. I think is a very popular mayor, but there are a few challenges for the DA. Can they hold? So the Patriotic Alliance, I think, would be their main concern going to this election. Gayton McKenzie is it's very hard to gauge how far he can go. I've got no doubt that he can do well in rural areas, but can he do what he did in the south of Johannesburg amongst the coloured communities in the south of Johannesburg, Ennerdale, Riverlea, and can he do that on the Cape Flats? I know he's going to be very focused on it. He's made some inroads in the Western Cape, so that would be the DA's main concern. Just very quickly on eThekwini. This is, and wow, we're speaking about KwaZulu-Natal a lot, which I love doing. When we think of KwaZulu-Natal, it's got 2 main reservoirs of votes. It's Durban, eThekwini, and then the Imsunduzi, Pietermaritzburg area, which is part of the Umgungundlovu district, the KwaZulu-Natal Midlands. The ANC has been killing it in the last few by-elections in 2023. The ANC is having a very tough time in by-elections in KwaZulu-Natal. But towards the end of the year, they have been showing some growth. And this is something which I'm going to watch greatly, because if the ANC can hold on to its support in eThekwini, it might be able to defy the odds in KwaZulu-Natal.
Okay, so who are their main opposition in KZN?
Great question. So we could have done a 4-hour show in KwaZulu-Natal. It's a fascinating province. When we think of KwaZulu-Natal, I just spoke about eThekwini and the Umgungundlovu district, the Midlands. Then we go to the northern KwaZulu-Natal area, large towns like Richards Bay and Newcastle, but also traditional IFP places like Ulundi. So that the IFP won another by-election off the ANC Northern KwaZulu-Natal in the last round of by-elections for the year. It's a very impressive result. When I look at these results, I don't just look at the overall result. I drill down voting district levels. There's a lot for the IFP to be enthusiastic about. When it comes to, but Gareth, what's key, and I alluded to the beginning of the show, Southern KwaZulu-Natal, Port Shepstone onward all the way to the Eastern Cape border, places like Umzimkhulu, these are rock-solid ANC areas. Places, parts of the country where Lanini Zuma hails from. This was, and I've said this many times and written this many times, this was whatever you may think of Jacob Zuma, whatever those people, ANC supporters who watching us or listening to us, the one thing they must categorically give Jacob Zuma credit for is Southern KwaZulu-Natal. He turned this into one of the safest ANC areas in the country. The returns in 2009 and 2014 in Southern KwaZulu-Natal in the Harry Gwala district and the Ugu district, that in many instances was the same as returns in rural Limpopo, rural Mpumalanga, and rural Eastern Cape. That is going to be key with the emergence of Jacob Zuma. So the big opponents, to just answer your question, are the IFP. You have Chris Pappas from the DA, who I think can energize Metro voters. And let's see Jacob Zuma's party. And of course, can the EFF? The EFF have had a terrible 2023 Natal, but can Julius Malema find form? So that's what the ANC would be worried about in KwaZulu-Natal.
I was going to say when it comes...
Yeah, go ahead, because I've kind of dominated this and you haven't had a chance. You go for it.
I was gonna say, in terms of polling, right? How accurate is our polling results? Because the DA also like we have been projecting like wins over the ANC in certain districts, like they've been leading the polls. That's my first question.
Yeah, I want to drink what those DA pollsters are drinking. I think it's very unlikely. Look, I think often the media writes off the DA too easily. The DA has, and its previous iteration, the DP, has been the official opposition now for many elections. I'd be very surprised if they don't return as the official opposition. But there's no opinion poll. Again, when someone gives an opinion or gives a projection, one's got to take a step back. The DA's best ever election result was under Mmusi Maimane in 2016. And that was all the stars aligned for the DA in that election. Jacob Zuma was very unpopular. Opposition was we're seeing a lot of fragmentation in our politics, but the opposition then was very weak. And a lot of that just fell into the support of the DA on election day. The DA also started attracting middle-class black voters in Gauteng. The DA swept the minority votes, white, English-speaking, white, Afrikaans-speaking, urban coloured vote, the Indian vote. The rural coloured vote is a bit of a competition. We can't say today, bar for the Indian community and amongst the English-speaking white community, that the DA has the same grasp over those communities or groups I just mentioned. So I think it's unlikely. Bakh'abantu.
So this is my second question, is what do we do about, like, because every time I have read like a result of an election, we have failed to create these new voters. Like you speak of this voting block that Zuma created basically from South KZN up until like rural Eastern Cape, Bizana, Kokstad, all those places. I know those places. Those places shine green with black and yellow. So what about, because what you're talking about, the Democratic Alliance votes, those people that they converted during Mmusi Maimane's era fell down to the FF plus. They fell down, like even now, Zuma fragmenting from the ANC, that takes away from these main voters. And I've never seen a political party convert those people into new voting power, like a new voting bloc.
It's a great point. So I think if I also first-time voters, we've seen a lot of initiatives, a lot of money, smart business people putting in money into voter registration campaigns. Look, we're still waiting for the full data to emerge from the first registration weekend, and this is important, very important statement I'm about to make, online voter registration for the entirety of 2023. But it seems like we haven't shot the lights out of voter registrations, which concerns me. And that's a conversation for another time. What does it mean for our democracy if less young people, less people participate in the elections? So, and that goes back to your point. I think it's easier to find. So first of all, you have to find voters who are registered. It's one thing saying it's. So let me go off on another quick tangent. The EFF have done very well in SRC election campaigns, student representative council election campaigns. But are we comparing apples with apples? In those SRC election campaigns, Bakh'abantu, you go online on your online portal at your university, put in your student card number, you don't have to show an ID, and you vote. And then you go back to drinking your beer or your cup of tea, whatever you're doing. It's very quick, painless, and simple. No getting in, no having to find transport to go to a polling station. When we vote, we need an ID book, we need to be registered, and we need to show up at the polling station we're registered to. Much, much harder. And that's why it's vital. So again, when I think of this, and I think it's relative to what you're saying, if we think back to Brexit and the vote on Brexit, the genius there was that the Leave campaign were able to find voters who hadn't voted for a very long time, who had sat elections out. Can a new political party, can an existing political party go and find those millions of South Africans who say, we no longer vote because we do not believe our ballot can make a difference in this particular election? And I think it's easier said than done. I think there's a lot of despair out there, and I really hope that we are not going to see our lowest ever turnout in a national election this time round.
I actually believe it's a fallacy that the EFF has done good in SRC politics. I famously participated in an SRC election year, 2016, Witwatersrand. So there, the EFF got the vote, right, by winning 60% of the people that voted. And we only found out that the people that voted were 40% of the university. As much as to speak to a democracy, we would say the people that participate in a democracy, their vote counts. But that was not a true representation of them winning anything. But yeah, and they couldn't even get 100% or 40% of the university. But that's like, but now when we speak to places like the Multi-Party Forum or the Moonshot Pact, like, does that move the needle for certain people? That, like, when you look at like political and like when you're analyzing the political system in South Africa, does that do something for South Africans?
Yeah, so I was quite critical of the multi-party charter when it started, because just to remind the listeners and the viewers, you're not going to be voting for the multi-party charter. You're going to be voting for a party in the multi-party charter. But what does the multi-party charter do? It's able to say, look, together we are bigger than what the DA got in 2016, considerably bigger by about 6 or 7 as a starting point, 6 or 7 percentage points. It also tells donors, look, and donors are key in this election. And I don't just look at donors as nefarious actors. I think a lot of donors, whoever they're giving money to, often have the intentions of the country at heart. And so this is key. I think it galvanizes donors to say, look, together we can bring parties together. We can work with the parties. And this is an idea, even if we don't unseat the ANC nationally, that the ANC potentially gets unseated in KwaZulu-Natal, Gauteng, and the Western Cape remains in the DA's hands, or the DA and another multi-party charter party's hands. So I think but what the multi-party charter will need, I believe, and this is easier said than done. This is what we saw the challenge with Roger Jardine, is I think if it has a candidate, a person who there is an agreement on, and I understand what the smaller parties are saying. They're saying, how can we agree on a candidate before the election is done? That's a very valid point. But if it can have a big name behind it, I think it can gain a few percentage points, and by gaining a few percentage points, it'll gain a few more rands, and it could be a virtuous cycle. It also shows a kind of maturity. Yes.
Sorry, you bring up Roger Jardine, and you're talking about we need powerful politicians and important characters and people who can really galvanize support. I haven't heard anyone say horrible things about Roger Jardine. I don't really know that much about the guy myself. I had to look him up. First of all, I wasn't even sure what he looked like. And as much as he seems like a good guy, and I honestly haven't heard anything negative about the man. Is he a person who will galvanize support? Is he a well enough known quantity, or is he just a hero of the business community who are going to try and foist this guy on us as a kind of, almost like the way that the DA tried to window dress themselves with Musi Maimane and it all fell apart? Is that what's going to happen here?
Yeah, or Rampele was another example.
Exactly.
I think the Roger Jardine, and again, we've had the launch now. I spoke about earlier, I thought it was a terrible time to launch a political party on a Sunday in December. I think it's fallen flat very quickly. I like being proven wrong. So I don't think Roger Jardine was the silver bullet to take the opposition parties and the multi-party charter up by a few percentage points. And I wonder if that person exists right now, Gareth. Just one thing, and this is a bit of a facile, a weakish comment, but basically we've seen there's this whole idea of politicians and hair. And just if I had to give some advice, what South Africans had known about Roger Jardine was that he had this incredible moustache. And when he launched the political party, the moustache was gone. So I don't know what that. So South Africans, is this Roger Jardine? So they really didn't know it was Roger. Those who didn't know him really didn't know it was him the day he launched the party, because that moustache, which has been associated for many years, was gone. So that was whoever gave him that advice gave him poor advice.
Terrible. And these things matter, right? I mean, politics, a lot of it is performative and a lot of it is posturing. And I don't know that someone who's in business necessarily knows how to do that stuff, because while business includes a lot of politics, politics includes a whole lot more than business.
100%. And Gareth, one of the things I do is when I go to events, I monitor politicians and I call it the selfie test. So I was at a national day of and look, this is a pretty elite setting, but their waiters, staff, etc. There are a lot of people attend these events. And I noticed at the 4th of July celebration this year for the United States, at the United States Embassy, Gayton McKenzie, people were queuing to have their selfies with him. And he was standing next to some pretty prominent politicians. Another one was Chris Pappas recently. I was at an event and there were other prominent politicians near him. People were running up to Chris Pappas to get their photo taken with him. I don't think people, wherever Roger Jardine, and I hope he's having I hope all politicians put their feet up for a bit, because they're going to have to hit the ground running early 2024. I don't think people this morning are going to be running up to Roger Jardine to have their selfie taken. So again, I don't think, to reinforce the point, that he is the silver bullet for the opposition project.
Okay, so let's talk about other opposition people here. Herman Mashaba, you mentioned Bantu Holomisa earlier. There's still COPE, believe it or not. There's still a COPE. I don't know who's in it. I don't know what they do, but there's still a COPE. Mangosuthu Buthelezi has exited stage left, and now the IFP, we're not even sure what's going on there. Are these other rats and mice parties worth paying attention to?
Yeah, the IFP is certainly a party worth paying attention to. Up until the last few rounds of by-elections, I think they were the overperformers of the year. And again, that's focus. I spoke about focus earlier. And look, I understand the reverence. Gareth, I was once on television speaking about commending the IFP and its new leader, Velenkosini Hlabisa. And I was saying it's amazing that this was before the founder Buthelezi had passed away, said it's amazing that the party is thriving. People said the IFP would fall apart under their new leader. And I said, no, they chastised me. No, Buthelezi is still in control of the IFP. So can the IFP stay together? Can they build up? Yes, I understand the reverence. That Buthelezi is literally the Hlabisa. You've got his teacher. You've got a guy who I think is eloquent. I think can connect to the base. He comes from very rural northern KwaZulu-Natal. Can the IFP have the vision to carry on building his brand and get more voters, maybe younger voters who were not willing to vote for the IFP in the past, who might be willing to vote for them this time? Look, I think Herman Mashaba in 2021, to talk about Action SA, he controlled much of his own lane. This was the lane for those black professionals who voted for the DA in 2021, and ANC, lower middle class to middle class black voters who are upset to the ANC. And he pretty much, he had very little entrance in that lane. You've seen since then that Songezo Zibi and Musi Maimani have entered the fray. You have seen that, as I said, there's the DA, which seems to be more disciplined now. I think they'll battle to win back those black voters who voted for the DA in 2016. But some of those white voters who vote for Action SA might come back to the DA. So I think Mashaba was in a stronger position in 2021 than he is today. But having said that, I think Action SA is more established than Rise Mzansi, more established than Build One South Africa. And look, the media really got behind Mashaba in 2021. I think it's going to be hard in 2024, but I think if he remains focused on more of the urban provinces, certainly Gauteng, certainly Johannesburg, there are good signs for him in Soweto, in some Soweto by-elections. Mashaba can definitely be a factor in this election. Then just with Bantu Holomisa, Gareth, I've said the word focus, and we can do the tally with the producers after the show many times in the show. What always mystifies me is we know that the United Democratic Movement have historically done best in the Mthatha Butterworth area. But yet, so I would say, go where your voters are. Go where your voters are. And you'll see Bantu Holomisa campaigning in Cape Town and Johannesburg and Durban. Instead of, if I was him giving advice, I would literally spend 95% of my time in those communities which voted for you impressively in that local government elections. Was it 2000, I think it was, when he ran for the first time. So that is what I would advise Holomisa. Otherwise, he's going to continue to be a reduced factor. If he's not focused, UDM and COPE might look. It's very hard to disappear because you only need need less than 0.25% to make it back. But it will be a very tough time for them.
Can I just ask quickly? You brought up the media just a second ago, and the media has this habit of. We have, and I'm not going to speak on behalf of the media, but we have this double standard in South Africa where we have extraordinary depths of understanding and levels of criticism which we deploy against the DA, for example. But there's a kid glove treatment so often with the ANC because I don't know, maybe because they're the biggest player in the economy, and maybe because the media isn't as independent as the media pretends to be. But when it comes to like backing horses, a lot of our media institutions and publications have done a terrible job over the last 10 elections. They've got it wrong almost every single time. And yet they don't seem to pay a price for that lack of ability to valuably ascertain what the next election might bring for us. They don't seem to lose credibility in I don't know, audience numbers, sales figures, publication. It seems to me that they don't pay a price for how useless they are when it comes to the elections. Or am I being especially unkind because we're in the media?
Well, I think we're seeing I spoke about that ANC in 99, 2004 just dominated so many aspects of our society. I think you're seeing the media. There's not going to be no Ramaphosa. I'd be very surprised unless this idea of an ANC EFF doomsday coalition. I do not see the media batting for Ramaphosa this time round. It's going to be interesting to see who the media gets behind. I think there's a lot of energy behind someone like Songezo Zibi. I don't think Songezo Zibi at this time is going to shoot the lights out in this election. So it'll be interesting to see whether the media continues on the Songezo Zibi train. I think he's a great guy, a smart guy, But I think that so you're correct. The media needs to take a step back. It's the same. We spoke earlier about the Brexit analogy. It was so clear that the media was out of touch with large swaths of South Africa, of the United Kingdom, and the media needs to be sure to not to understand that this time might be very much different. But equally, Gareth, and let me contradict myself, understanding South Africa also means understanding those deep rural areas which remain intensely loyal to the ANC. But I don't think we're going to see another bout of Ramaphosa this time around.
Okay. I think we've covered quite a lot of ground here, but one other last thing, the election itself. Do you think, because we had the IEC's Deputy Chief Electoral Officer on the show in our first episode of Democracy 101, we had Baliantuli last week, who was very, very interesting. But the IEC, are they on top of things? Is it going to be a free and fair election? Should we worry about how independent the IEC is?
Yeah, look, as you know, I deal a lot with data and analysis, and I look at priors. The elections have been ostensibly free and fair, and I think it will be this time around. Time is not on our side. Remember that, and I'm sure Mbali spoke about it, or the IC spoke about it much better than I can. The third ballot. So it's a different animal this time around. Some of the election is going to be slightly different to previous elections, but we have to be hopeful that political parties be vigilant against fraud, that they'll hold the IEC to account, that the IEC will hold political parties to account. When we've seen the ANC or other parties lose power, there has 9.5 times out of 10 be a free transfer of power. We know on a local government elections that there have been hiccups, not just, by the way, I can give you ANC examples, IFP examples, DA examples, where it's been a long, frustrating handover of power. It hasn't been that swift, but largely, I have to be hopeful that elections are going to be free and fair, that Cliff Central are going to, and other media houses will play its part in ensuring that and holding those to account. It's going to be absolutely critical.
Okay, but you still you reserve some. Let's say you reserve a little bit of cautious optimism.
Yeah, I'm having a sleepless night about it yet. Look, the IEC has to work against a very close timeline. Will people be trained correctly? So I'll give you my biggest concern right now are those zip machines. This can be a real bottleneck if the machines stop working. So you get large turnouts at a voting station, and you have this bottleneck where they can't check your barcoded ID or that piece of paper they give you. And then people just go away. There were scenes in our last local government elections. Would it have altered the result? In a very close municipality like Nelson Mandela Bay, maybe the ANC would have got an extra seat or the DA would have got an extra seat. There were people waiting in the lines long after closing time. So that's it. As long as the political parties hold the IEC to account, I remain hopeful.
Okay. All right. Anything else you want to throw in, Bakh'abantu, and then we'll wrap this up?
No. Mr. Sussman speaks on a lot of focus, right? Focus by political parties. But I think also voters should also think about focus. Focus on your neighborhood. Focus on what you want from this election. I think we're past the whole point, but we need to know that this is a pivotal election. You need to know what you want from it. So even though it's pivotal, you need to know what you want. What can someone like Action SA speak to you? What does the EFF speak to you? What does the ANC speak to you? And then you vote according to those needs. I think that's a mindset that we all need to have. Focus, to reiterate your words.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's very sensible. Wayne, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate having a conversation with you. You certainly know what you're talking about. And I think we are entering a really, really exciting new phase for South Africa. No matter what happens in these elections, it's all of these parties are unsure of the ground that they're standing on. And that's a good thing. When politicians are unsure, the people can take some pleasure and some joy out of that, some reassurance maybe. So I think let's go into this with our eyes wide open. And as Bakh'abantu says, you've got to have some idea of what you want before you go to the polls and before you expect parties to make promises to you, hollow promises very often, about things they can't actually do. You've got to have very realistic expectations. Anything you want to add as closing remarks?
Just one last thing. I spoke about it being the festive season. Politicians and IEC officials, rest now, but do not rest on your laurels in 2024.
Very good. All right, Wayne, lovely to see you. Thank you very much. And thank you to you for joining us this morning on Democracy 101. We will continue this in the new year. This is our last Democracy 101 for 2023. And before you blink, before you open your eyes, it'll be a brand new year, an election year. And we've got lots of really important stuff to pay attention to going forward into that election year. Thanks, Bakh'abantu. Thank you very much to Wayne Susman. Also, thank you to JJ Cornish earlier, but most especially to you for joining us. We will see you tomorrow for not live, but I think pretty damn interesting show. So stick around for that and a bunch of other things on the Gareth Cliff Show. As I mentioned a little bit earlier, we've got Dan Mace, who is the guy who runs Mr. Beast's philanthropy channel, and a guy who's an absolute whiz at getting millions and millions of hits on YouTube. You want to know how? You got to listen to that interview tomorrow. And then Red Hills School's Pioneering Center for Dialogue and Conflict Resolution, about a really, really smart way to get young people to have interesting debates and discussions. And LJ Fenter on Thursday as well, a must-listen exclusive. Some amazing facts he's never brought up before about some of the things that he is very much paying attention to in the world, and things that he's happy to talk about now because he reckons it's now or never. So he's spilling the beans. Take a listen to that. We'll see you tomorrow, everybody, on a not live, but still action-packed show. We'll be back for our last show Friday morning. Cheers. Bye-bye.